Let's talk to Chris. Pronouns he, him, calling in from Puerto Rico. Who wants to talk about Adam and Eve, the tree of good and evil, and all sorts of other things. Chris, you were on the line with Jovan and FORREST.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Hello? Okay, perfect. By the way, about the soup thing, well, you guys were really missing the mark there. The real question should be, is cereal a soup? That's the real question.
Yes.
Now we're
no,
talking.
soup has to be hot. No, soup has to be hot.
There's
It has to be hot, then why is that why is gazpacho soup then?
It's not. It's gazpacho.
Then is gazpacho... No, you don't know about that?
I am literally looking it up right now, and there is a Wikipedia article, list of cold soups, and gazpacho is on there.
None of those are soups.
You know what it is?
Do you know what it is, FORREST?
I got you.
No. Do you know what it is? When you have my type of autism, you just know when a thing is a thing or not a thing. And you just and hot soup has to be hot. That's just a
facts. Don't care about
you just
feelings,
know it when
Jovan.
you.
I don't. This makes no sense.
Soup got to be hot. What we want? We could go to Chris.
Yeah. Soup got him hot, and now he's soup too.
Well, whatever. So before we start speaking about theology, I wanted to tell you FORREST. I appreciate I've been seeing your videos, and I appreciate your work regarding joke creation. I think that you do a good work against, well, I believe the worst arguments for it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And also, I have noticed that I don't remember you ever addressing Kent Hovind. That would be extremely cool.
Yeah, Kent Hovind has made several videos about me. I have yet to reply because I don't really feel he's dying, both physically and figuratively and literally. He's just going out, and he's so irrelevant anymore. And I just don't feel the need to use my platform to prop up and give any more attention to some fucking outdated wife-beating racist who hasn't updated his shitty arguments in 20 fucking years. So for me, it's just not worth the time, but I may get around to it someday. The problem is right now I am in the process of earning yet another legitimate science degree from an accredited university, which is a process that Mr. Hovind is not familiar with, but I assure you it is actually quite tasking, and I just don't want to take any time off for his dumbass.
Oh, yeah, I understand. It's very hard to get a degree when you don't go to a diploma mill, which is literally a trailer.
Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah, okay. So whatever, the real deal, what I wanted to speak about was that, okay, let me get quickly do something. Okay, perfect. I remember I was watching some of your videos in the line and atheist experience. And I remember one of your claims was on that, why did Adam and Eve were culpable for eating the fruit if they didn't know what good and evil was? I am right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. What would be the argument there, if you can summarize it?
I guess the summary would be that my biggest problem with the Garden of Eden story is that it was a test of obedience, not a test of morality. Adam and Eve were literally born yesterday. They had not eaten from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, so they did not know what good and evil were. All they had was an edict. They had a commandment not to touch this tree. And when they ate from that tree, because God put it in the garden next to them, then they were been punished forever, with women especially being punished. Men are punished because we are sinful creatures that can go to hell now. Women have that, and also childbirth is painful, and also they are subservient to men. That's the extra punishment for women that makes no fucking sense. And so any parent or anybody who's ever even worked in childcare or education, any halfway intelligent person that knows how human beings work would know that if you tell a child, don't touch this, and then leave them alone in the room with it, they're going to touch it. And so God, first of all, made this dumbass tree. Second of all, put it next to these people who were literally born yesterday. then also God is all knowing. He supposedly knew this was going to happen anyway and let it happen in the first place. He tells the first lie in existence by telling them they're going to die if they eat from the tree. Just over and over and over, this whole story is God fucking up over and over and making stupid mistakes and then punishing all of humanity, not for doing something wrong, but for being disobedient. And that to me is not a moral story. It's just, it's an establishment of the character of God as a stupid, narcissistic bully who wants everybody to behave in a way that he wants them to behave. Otherwise, he'll punish them ridiculously. It's setting up the character as an asshole. That's for me, what I see this story as. I know I said I was going to summarize, and I gave you a lot. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I noticed that. So, okay. Let's start to something. You say that they were like children, right? Well, that's interesting because, well, at least as far as I've been taught, well, actually I do think that Adam and Eve were not children. My tradition at least those hold that they had infused knowledge and knew they had infused knowledge, so they were not like children. They knew the essences of all things.
Okay. Does it say that?
They were essentially
Sorry,
children.
ahead,
They didn't have any experience. Essentially they would have to be like children. They didn't have any experience with like anything. How old? Like what?
Right.
Like what? What is the age? Like they were that we estimate they ate the fruit. It wasn't that long from coming into existence to eating the fruit, and we know that they didn't know things because God had to tell them things. They at least had no knowledge of good and evil, which I think is kind of like paramount to being an adult,
Yeah. What I think is that when God made them, He essentially infused all relevant knowledge needed to have dominion and take care of the garden. As I think that somebody said that they were supposed to take care of the garden. So He infused.
So let's assume that's true. The problem is they still don't know what right or wrong is. All they know is how to follow orders. And that
no, they knew good and evil.
How did they? If they did know good and evil, then why couldn't they eat from the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil? That's what the tree was supposed to do. It taught them what good and evil was.
I don't think so. I think that regarding the tree of knowledge of good and evil, I think that this refers to the legal authority to determine what is good and evil. I think that it has something more to do with that. They had two options: to choose God or to don't. And I think that
they didn't have two options though.
Just to be clear, I have Genesis chapter 2 verse 17 open, and I just dropped a goddamn bookmark, whatever. But I've got Genesis chapter 2 verse 17 open here, and it says, God is talking about like what's going on in the garden. He's telling Adam, and he says, the Lord commanded the man, saying, "Of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat. For the day that you eat from it, you shall surely die." And so this, number one, is a lie. They don't die the same day. And number two, it clearly says that this is the tree that gives them the knowledge of good and evil. So by any definition you're giving me, if they have a sense of right or wrong, all that right or wrong really boils down to is, are they obeying God? And that's what I'm trying to get at, is that this is not a morality test. This is an obedience test. Do you choose God, or do you choose yourself? Do you choose whatever you want to do? It's just asking, are you going to obey orders without any explanation, without knowing why? And I don't think anybody should do that.
I want to just address too with something, Chris, that you said. They didn't have a choice to pick something else. Adam and Eve did not have a choice. They were always going to eat the fruit. There was no universe conceived that existed or could possibly exist where they didn't eat the fruit. So it's just whenever we talk about, at least about the quote unquote first sin, it just seems weird, in my opinion, that God set up this unwinnable test and then it's like, hey, yo, I'm going to punish you for failing a test that you couldn't pass.
Interesting. Okay, about Forrest, that this was a lie. I will simply say that when he says, "On the very day you shall die," this refers to spiritual death, like they will lose sanctifying grace.
Yeah. I've heard that a lot, and the problem is, number one, that isn't how it's used in the book. The word, the Hebrew word or whatever it is that is used for this is the same word that means death in every other circumstance. Dan McClellan put out a video about this not too long ago, where he actually broke down the etymology of the word and showed that it's the same way the word death is used all throughout the Bible when it means somebody's like stabbed with a sword. Like it means the same thing. And second of all, like uh, that goes against what happens next, where all the serpent ever says is, "You won't die. God knows that the day you eat thereof, your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be like gods, knowing good and evil." That's chapter 3, verse 4 and 5. Um, so the serpent says you won't die, you will just know what good and evil is. So the way that that's phrased, that doesn't mean anything to do with spiritual death. That would, if they had a spiritual death, he wouldn't need that clarification. There would be no reason to speak that way. So I think that is a what we would call a post hoc rationalization that apologists do to try to make it make sense. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's very clear that's not what God meant in that passage. And even if it was, then he was just shitty with his language.
Um, that seems to be a bit of a weird point because even today, when we speak of being like spiritually dead, we use the exact same word that we use to normal death. It's not like we have a separate word for that.
You say we have separate words for what? I'm
I
sorry,
mean,
I couldn't hear you.
yes, I mean that. For example, when we say that somebody is spiritually dead, we use the exact
Mhm.
same word like for really dead, which is just dead.
But the problem is Adam and Eve didn't spiritually die either, because when they die, Adam and Eve go to, well, Adam at least goes to heaven. So where was the
Mhm.
spiritual death?
No, later. Spiritual death refers to the loss of sanctifying grace, and they both lose it at the fall.
Yes, but when
They
Adam dies,
also
he gains that back.
he also lives for
No,
800 years. So like what are we talking about here in any case? Like they still live for a ridiculously long time. They still get to go to heaven. They all that's happening is like I've heard this said like this from this moment on they're now mortal, but like even that it's just there's it's just trying to make this make sense in a way that it never did before. You know what I mean? It's trying to add context that simply isn't in the text. The book doesn't say spiritual death. It doesn't say anything about that. You're just doing the thing that a lot of Christians do, which is to say, well, the Bible technically didn't say this, so that must have been what it meant. And like that's just not good enough, I'm afraid.
that's a solid criticism. Well, I personally don't believe in sola scriptura, which may be an issue there. From my understanding, this is what the tradition from since the early church has believed, and for me that also has, well, not the same but similar authority as the Bible itself.
Can I just, if let me just ask you, if what God meant when, because God tell Adam and Eve understand a concept of things dying. They would have to, because they eat animals
Um,
in the Garden of Eden. So they would have to. There are animals that they
possibly.
eat that were alive at one point and dead at one point, right? So if God knows that
So,
Adam and Eve have a concept of death, why wouldn't he very specifically say you're going to die a spiritual death? Why wouldn't he specify?
mm,
Especially if
that's actually
God
a good
sees all
question.
and knows that eventually we're going to be debating this. He would know that if
Yeah.
he had just said spiritual death, nobody would be debating his word in the book.
It also like, and there are people
Well,
like
for that,
Answers in Genesis. There are people like Answers in Genesis who say that they didn't eat any animals, that everything was vegetarian at that time. And but plants also would then be dying when they're being eaten. So like there's no way to get around death if you're a living thing. Like if you're an animal, death is a necessary part of your life. I just want to get out ahead of that comment because I know that comment's coming.
Yeah, I really don't know about the answers in Genesis thing, but for now I will say that you guys are making some good points and are making me think about this. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, this is a pretty complicated issue. Yeah.
I would also encourage you, Chris, like just if we're gonna try to make this story make sense, it's also important to point out that Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2 are completely different stories as well. It's argued that Genesis chapter 2, Genesis chapter 2 is the older one, and it has this more of a like kind of all at once creation, and God is just like this guy that's kind of just walking around trying to make things make sense, and like creation isn't immediately good and perfect, and he has to kind of tweak it and fine tune it, and the order of operations is totally different than it is in Genesis chapter 1. Genesis chapter 1 is a later adaptation to make God more in line with the kind of Christian mentality of this all important, all knowing, all powerful being that gets everything right all at once. And so you have a completely different set of stories. So I would challenge you while you're thinking about this. Why are we trying to make this one verse 2:17? Why are we trying to make that one verse make sense when if you just look at the page right before it, it's a completely different story that doesn't even line up with this? The least of your problem is trying to make Genesis 2:17 make sense. Your much bigger problem is trying to make Genesis chapter 1 fit with Genesis chapter 2 and make either of those fit with reality. So I think you've got your work cut out for you. Even if you can make us, even if I agreed with you about the interpretation of verse 17 there, we don't agree on the rest, and the rest is a much scarier problem for Christianity.
Yeah, I agree with that. I actually already knew about the whole deal of Genesis chapter 2 being possibly earlier than Genesis chapter 1, and Genesis chapter 2 being a more primitive vision of God, more anthropomorphic, with him like walking up in hell and all of that. And then Genesis chapter 1 is like a more transcendent version of God, which just speaks things into existence, while the chapter 2 one like creates stuff out of other stuff. I actually already knew about that. And even my study Bible says just that.
Yeah, it's a lot. I think you're asking good questions, and the points you're bringing up to us are the kind of apologetics that we get all the time. And I really appreciate you taking the time to hear us out when we kind of give you some answers to them. I hope you call us back with more questions sometime. I hope that we were helpful, and I hope that you keep asking questions and let us know if we can be more helpful.
Yeah, maybe one day when I study this more deeply, I can give better answers.
Yeah, I would love that. Chris, it's been a pleasure talking to you. We're going to move on to the next call, but go ahead.
Unfortunately, I have another point. Can I speak about that before?
Yeah, as long as it's very fast, because we have other people waiting.
Okay. Another one of your comments was whether something can happen against God's will, and the easy answer will be to distinguish between God's antecedent will, which is what God generally wants, and God's consequent will, which is what God does in consideration of the creators. So you can violate God's antecedent will, but not his consequent will.
I don't know if I agree with that either, if I'm understanding it properly.
Why? Okay, analogy. Imagine a judge. You're a judge, okay? And you want all men in your city, all humans to live happily. That's your antecedent will. All humans live happily. Then there comes a criminal who murders someone, and so you sentence him to life in prison. That's your consequent will.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry.
That's more or less how it works.
I might have just misunderstood. I've got a kind of crackly connection.
Wait. I understand just real quick. None of this works if you have a being that can see the future. If I have something, let me explain. If I have something that I know is going to be stolen, like let's say I have a criminal who's going to come in and steal a diamond, And I know for a fact, 100% certain, this diamond is going to be stolen from this area on this day at this time. And I leave the diamond there. I didn't really care about that diamond. Otherwise, I would have moved the diamond. So if God knew that Adam and Eve were going to eat from the tree, he knew the snake was going to show up to convince them to eat from the tree. Why not A, move the tree, or B, don't have the snake show up? He knew it was going to happen and he let it happen because he wanted it to happen.
That's a good question. This really gets into the most fine details of like predestination and divine foreknowledge. I don't know if I'm ready to answer that for now, but I will try to think
an all-powerful, all-seeing,
maybe
all-knowing being, everything that happens in the universe would have to be to the will of that being. It would just have to be.
At some degree, I think that will be right, but not in the accepting sense. I think you should mean that. I mean, we'll agree that, like, at some degree, God has decreed absolutely everything that happens, but not everything is by His active decree. Some things is just by His permissive decree.
Yeah, but if He didn't want it to happen, He would stop it.
If He did not want it to happen, He will stop it.
Yeah, He's all powerful. If He really didn't want it to happen, if it was something that would make him upset or mad, He could just stop it.
That's the issue. If you have an all powerful and all knowing God, the buck stops with Him. Everything is ultimately His fault, no matter what. So, like, you can say, well, we need free will. Okay, why didn't He make a universe where you didn't have the temptation in the first place? You can say, oh, well, He needed this and that to whatever other justification. He could have made a universe where those justifications weren't necessary. It is logically possible, super unlikely, but logically possible to make a universe which is set up in such a way that every single person makes the perfectly right choice every single time, totally of their own free will. Nobody ever sins. And He didn't make that universe. And He also already knows before you're even born whether or not you're going to sin and go to hell, and He made you anyway. Inevitably, the responsibility is always with Him. Unless if you want to say He's not all-knowing or He's not all-powerful, then He gets out of that loop. But if He's all-knowing and all-powerful, every bad thing that happens must have happened on purpose.
That's actually a good point. It's probably one of the most difficult arguments to respond. I will admit that.
Yeah. Anyway, Chris, we've got some other folks waiting. Our lines are full, so we're going to move on. But I really appreciate you calling in and talking to us today. I hope you call back sometime.
If you like this debate and you want to see more debates like this, head over to the Lines page at QN Align or Jimmy Snow on the Line at Jimmy Snow.